Work at a top bank, the truth is your job is always at risk, right? You could be working even in a senior role as a managing director in a high-paying role at top banks like JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs or Morgan Stanley, but there could be a reshuffle and you could lose your job. And secondly, you could also be made a scapegoat, right? There could be a potential scandal, a potential major conflict internally, some bad media on a particular project that you worked on, a particular IPO or transaction, and then all of a sudden you're working on a finance project, it doesn't quite work out well, and then you lose your job, right? So it's kind of a risky industry to be working in. In this video, I'll give you a few examples of exactly why. Let's go through it now, right, in a bit of detail. So why is it potentially such a big deal that your job is at risk, right? And why is your job at risk if you work in finance in particular, any other top corporate role? In this example, we have JP Morgan, as you can see here, and they're talking about changing some of their senior management. As you can see here, they're changing their leadership, right? They're changing their senior management, their managing directors, everything from their global banking division, which would be like investment banking, commercial, corporate, investment banking divisions. These are all quite senior names. I work in the industry, so I've heard of their names. And you can also see they're changing a lot of their other equity capital markets contacts, debt capital markets, which is essentially investment banking, and then capital markets here is referring to sales and trading. So they're changing a lot of their senior management. We don't have to go through every name here to know all the details, but essentially what it's saying to you is, it could be a very senior role at a major company like JP Morgan, as you can see here, in commercial banking, investment banking, sales and trading. And then they can all of a sudden, because of someone even more senior than them, maybe in the head office in New York and Wall Street, they could say, oh, your job's not viable anymore. We don't want to keep you here. We want a refresh of new talent. We want a new approach to business. We want to hire someone who's a bit more maybe more skilled than you, or someone from another company, or someone who's friends with senior management, and they want to get rid of you. And you can go from earning a very high salary of maybe 500K a year, a million a year, plus bonuses of $1 million or more. And then all of a sudden you lose your job. You've done nothing wrong. Maybe you've had good performance, or given that there's issues in the market and recession and so on, maybe you've done the best you can in quite a difficult trading market, and they deem you not necessary, right? Now, this is some of the challenges you might have to deal with in finance, and that's why I advise you always look out for your best interest, not the company best interest. Even if you're working at a senior role, your job is at risk, and it's arguable that even if you are at a more senior role, maybe your job is at more risk, because what ends up happening is you're essentially, there's roles at that senior level with those higher salaries for managing directors at JP Morgan or other top banks. So there's more intense competition for these. If you're looking for a similar role at another company, those are quite rare to find. You might have to take a massive pay cut to go and work for maybe a smaller bank if you lose your job at JP Morgan due to a layoff, even if you're in a senior role. And the lesson to really learn from this here is that if they're picking new managers, you're very disposable, right? So you should always save your money, invest your money, plan for an early retirement, plan for potential gaps in your resume, gaps in your employment, particularly if you're senior. It might take, more than a few weeks or a few months to find your next job. It might take close to a year. So for a year, you might be unemployed, right? So think that through, right? Even if you're earning a high salary and maybe you're living at that level, you have lifestyle creep or lifestyle inflation where you're working top job at JP Morgan and you think, oh, you're going to work it forever. So you buy an expensive house, you put your kids in private school, you buy expensive cars and watches and go on family holidays, or spend money on yourself, or, just basically blow your budget, right? And that's something you should look out for, to be careful of. And myself, as a career coach who's worked at some of these top banks, that's a key lesson I have for everyone through this example. Now we're going to move on to the second example here, right, which is Goldman Sachs, right? Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley, and I've worked at both of these companies, and what they're facing here is an investor lawsuit, right? So we've got here, you can see clearly here, of course, Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley, and they're facing an investor lawsuit at Arrowgrass, which is basically a client company, right? We won't go through all the details, but what we can learn from this is essentially they worked on an important finance project for this client and they didn't do things the right way, right? And in effect, what they did is they were taken to court by this client and they had to face quite severe financial consequences, potential massive fines, potential being sued for quite a large amount of money. And they're saying that the bank did not follow the required procedures, right? They did not avoid conflicts of interest, protect client confidentiality, and prevent insider trading. So what this means, and I've worked on specific things like this on the trading floor of these major investment banks, not on this particular project, so I'm not disclosing anything sensitive there. So what this means is you didn't control the client information internally, so it's only shared with the most relevant people who are working on those projects. Other people could have found out about the project and traded ahead of the market, which means, trading illegally on the basis of sensitive client information, which is insider trading. Also, there's other things they've done, which is, not keep that client confidential information confidential and not manage conflicts of interest. You have different divisions within banks. They shouldn't know every little detail of what other departments are doing, because it could be a conflict of interest. You're not following the proper fair market practices of how banks should operate in a fair way, so they're not taking advantage of clients, taking advantage of other traders. And the point here is you could be working at a major bank, maybe working on a major project, a high-profile client, Archie, which is quite a large company. You can see from this article here that they have 20 billion exposure to Viacom CBS, right, which is a media company in America. So what it's telling you here is that you could be working on this major project, doing the right thing, following the rules, but if there's a client who decides to sue the company, if there is someone maybe more senior than you or another person on the finance project who makes some questionable decisions, they illegally leak the information, trade ahead of that, it could reflect poorly on you. And then all of a sudden you're on a finance project, working very hard, working long hours, spending time after work, on the weekends, maybe on this investment banking deal. It doesn't quite work out. And then all of a sudden you might be made the scapegoat for a client, for a company-wide issue. They might say, well, you were working on the project. Why didn't you flag this issue to us? We're going to put you on a disciplinary process. We might fire you. We might hold you responsible, because the company doesn't want to look bad. They want to blame a few employees for really a systemic issue. Now, this is something you should always consider when you are working for a major company. You could be made the scapegoat at any moment, right? There could be other banks who are engaging in other type of activity like this, type of manipulative trading activity. Then they need someone to blame and say, okay, once we fire that person, we fix the issue. And then they go on doing what they've done before, but your job has just been laid off, or essentially. You've just been fired. To help the company move forward, you've been blamed for all the issue, right? Now, this is something you should always plan ahead of. That's why you need to be aware of office politics, the company you're working at. Don't be, and I've seen this happen to other people, it's been me early on in my career, don't be the naive, hardworking guy, and then all of a sudden you're putting in all this effort, they're looking at you in as someone who can be exploited, essentially, right? That, oh, you're going to do all the extra work, you're going to work hard, you're going to be quite naive about the manipulation or you being made the scapegoat for other things going wrong with other people. Always be one step ahead and be a bit more cunning and a bit more calculated and shrewd about your business practices when you are working for a company, so you don't get made the scapegoat and blamed for a potential client issue. Potential massive scandal, right? So just always be one step ahead of the company you're working for. So there you have it. That's exactly why it can be risky for you if you are working in the finance industry, and even if you're in a senior role, if you're working on very high profile projects, if it doesn't work out well for the company, they could see you as a scapegoat and want to get rid of you. So that's why you should always save your money, invest your money, look for other career opportunities that do pay well, plan ahead for any potential recession, gaps in your resume, gaps in your employment by planning ahead, because at the end of the day, the company's looking out for their best interest. There could be whole layers of office politics you're not aware of, and then all of a sudden it negatively impacts your job stability. So look out for that, and I hope you learned from this video. There are 2 recommended videos on your screen right now, a free ebook in the description, and I'll see you next time.